Hello everybody, my name is Kat and welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things horror. And today we are finally talking about Speak No Evil. Now, I have said in the past that this particular film was one that I was not looking forward to this year. I have done videos talking about this whole remake trend, specifically talking about Blumhouse and how it seems like their new model of making films is to just get whatever popular IP that they can and then just make endless sequels, requels, remakes, whatever. I myself am a huge fan of the original film, and when the trailers for this new version dropped, it very much looked like a typical just shot-for-shot remake of the original. Didn't look like they were really trying anything new. They were actually spoiling a lot of things about the original film in the trailer, and overall it just seemed very unnecessary. So I was very critical of this film. I will admit I went into this new film totally prepared to be a hater, especially since I feel like we've seen the trailer for this thing for so many months now. They released the trailer for this back in March, April, and it was throughout the whole spring and all of summer. It didn't matter what movie you went to, you were gonna have to sit there and watch that Speak No Evil trailer every single time you went to the theater. If I had $1 for every time in the past 7 or 8 months that I had to hear James McAvoy saying, "Of course I'm a bloody doctor." If I had $1 every time I heard that, I probably still wouldn't be able to buy that much in this economy, but still. So I went into the film already feeling kind of burnt out on it, just because, again, they went very overboard with the promotion of this movie. Was it as bad as I was expecting it to be? No, actually. This is actually very surprising in that there's a decent film here. I still can't believe it. I can't believe I'm actually standing here and saying that the Speak No Evil remake was actually not that bad and kind of a good time. Probably the biggest thing that was surprising about this movie is that it's taking a very, very different tone than the first film. If you've seen the original film, you know that it's a bleak movie. It is so dark, it's so depressing. It's one of those movies where you're gonna watch it and it's just gonna ruin your day. Whereas this film is much more horror comedy, or I don't even know if I would categorize it as horror, maybe thriller comedy. It's funny, right? It's taking a much more comedic approach to the material. And there are certainly people out there that will say that the original Speak No Evil actually has comedic elements and is just a very dark comedy. And they say that because of some of the ridiculous choices that the characters do make in that narrative. And I will give credit that the filmmakers at least tried to give this a different tone while they did stick to the original story pretty faithfully for the most part, with some deviations here and there. I think probably the most that got changed is the third act, but that first and second act is pretty much on par with the original. But again, I at least appreciate that they tried to take a different tone with it. This film is directed by James Watkins, who you might know as the director of films like Eden Lake, which is another movie that I love. Eden Lake has very similar vibes to the original Speak No Evil in terms of it just being a very bleak, very violent story. And technically Eden Lake came out first, so it would not surprise me if the filmmakers of the original Speak No Evil looked at that film as an influence. So it's kind of interesting that now he's coming back around to do the remake. I feel he already made his dark version of Speak No Evil with Eden Lake, so I can see why he wanted to take a much more, I don't want to say lighthearted, but it does. It gets very comedic. It's very funny in parts where you wouldn't expect it to be. I can see how people who have not seen the original film would go into this and have a really great time with it, because again, you're not having the baggage of the original film, so everything is going to feel brand new to you. There's going to be people who really love the original and really love this new version and really be able to appreciate the two different styles of it. And then there's going to be other people that are fans of the original that will probably find this film a bit derivative or just doesn't have quite the same impact that the 2022 version did. While I enjoyed this new film for what it was, I would probably place myself more in the category of the person that prefers the original. I'm not saying that to be, you know, like a pick-me. I'm not saying that to be a hipster. I'm not saying that just to like hate on the new version because it's new. I just appreciated the darker tone that the original took, and for me it had a much more impact when I watched it the first time than when I saw this movie. I think the reason why I liked the original so much is that I went into it not expecting anything. The first time I saw it was actually Sundance, when they were doing their like watching the festival at home thing, right when we were in the middle of like the pandemic and everyone was still staying at home. I was just interested in kind of what horror films they were showing, and so I just bought like online passes to whatever was available, and Speak No Evil was one of the first films. And again, I went into it like not knowing anything about it at all. This was before all the hype around it, and yeah, it just kind of felt like a punch in the throat. I was not expecting to be as disturbed by it as I was. It was one of those films that stayed with me for days after I watched it. I've said this before, the general theme that the original has in terms of talking about these social dynamics that we have and how sometimes we might put ourselves in uncomfortable positions in order to make other people comfortable, right? In order to avoid any kind of conflict. As someone that is a huge like people pleaser, I feel like the message of the original film just really resonated with me. And again, it just kind of gave me all of these like feelings of actually being like disturbed and frightened that many horror films just were not giving me at the time. So I think that's why that film in particular just stood out and why I gravitated to it so much and why I latched onto it. I did go back and rewatch the original before seeing the new one. I know that there's people out there that are going to be like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. I feel like I hear that with a lot of like sequels or requels of like, oh, don't watch the original because that's going to ruin your experience of the new one. I guess my thing is that like, you know, if the new version, if it's like a good movie, then it should be able to stand on its own. Like me seeing the original actually shouldn't have that much of an impact on the new version if it is in fact like a well-crafted film. I went back and rewatched the original. There's so many things about it that I really enjoy, particularly just the style of it. There's a lot of wide angle shots going on. There's a lot of shots that make you as the audience realize just how small the protagonists are in this world that they're in, right? It definitely adds a level of vulnerability. Even the use of sound, I was really noticing the second time around, maybe because I was wearing headphones, but there's a lot of moments where you like hear off-screen sounds, right? I think of like the one moment in the original where the wife character, she's in the shower, and the person that's playing James McAvoy's character in the original, like he comes in to the bathroom while she's showering, like not even acknowledging that she's in the shower, like doesn't even care. And you can just hear him brushing his teeth. And it's the most unsettling thing because it's like you're not seeing him, it's just completely off screen. But they're using sound in such a way, like it's opening up the space and you know that there's like danger on the periphery that you're not seeing. And then it's like you can hear him, you can hear like the brushing getting louder. That indicates that he's getting closer and closer to the shower door while she's just in there cowering. And it's like, it's so creepy. I feel like the original film is an accomplishment on just a technical level. I feel like these are stylistic things that I didn't quite get in the new movie. Not to say that the new movie isn't like stylistic. This new one takes place in the English countryside, so you have a lot of very beautiful shots of like nature, but I just didn't feel like it had the same stylized choices that the original film does. Overall, on a technical level, this kind of just felt like run-of-the-mill Hollywood film. Like, yes, it looked nice, but there wasn't particularly anything about the cinematography or the sound design where I was like, wow. What I also liked too about the original film is that the filmmakers let certain scenes breathe. There are moments where you have all the characters together, they're sitting around, and like something super uncomfortable is happening. Let's take the scene where they first arrive at their house. It's the first night there and everyone's just like hanging out, and the protagonists can hear the young kid in his bedroom crying. You can see the wife getting more and more uncomfortable as the conversation is going on and nobody's acknowledging that the child is sounding in distress. And that was super like weird and eerie and uncomfortable. Whereas in the remake, all of these moments are pretty fast. Like I feel like the remake has a much quicker pace to it than the original. You have the same scene happening in the 2024 version, and it's like the kid starts moaning and screaming and the wife is immediately like, oh, is he okay? Instead of like kind of letting it go on for a little bit and letting letting that moment breathe and really building up that uncomfortableness. As much as I love the original film, like, I acknowledge it definitely has its flaws, especially from a narrative standpoint, and rewatching it again, that definitely stood out. You know, there's things that don't feel very realistic for the characters to be doing. I think of the scene where the couple decides to leave. They leave early in the morning, they sneak out, and they're driving and they're on their way, and the young daughter is like, oh, I left my bunny, I left my stuffed bunny at the house, we have to go back and get it. And they're looking around the car trying to like find it, and eventually the dad is like, okay, well, I'm just gonna go back and get it. And then they get there, and then they get back to the house, and then the daughter looks under the seat and she's like, oh, look, I found the rabbit. You all really weren't looking under the seat to find this bunny before you decided to go back? If I was them and I was in that situation and I did not want to go back to that house, I would be looking over every nook and cranny of that car before being like, okay. And even then I probably would have still been like, yeah, sorry kid, we're just going home. So it was like things like that where it felt like the narrative was kind of pushing itself into a bit of like unrealistic territory just to kind of get the narrative to move forward. And what's interesting is that I feel like this new film does correct these mistakes that the original film does. It does find other workarounds to tell the story in a bit more fluid way. There are definitely still moments with the protagonist where it's like, really, you're gonna be this dumb? Another thing with the original film is like, why wouldn't you just like make up some excuse and tell them why you have to leave? Like, you don't even need to tell them the truth. Like, just make up something. And at least the characters in this new film do have that conversation with each other at one point of like, okay, well, we'll just make up like some excuse and we'll say that's why we gotta leave. So there are definitely narrative beats that this new film does better than the original. I also like how this new film expanded on the children characters. They make the kids older in this new version. It makes more sense for the narrative, right? Because in the original you have the kids there, but they're kind of just like in the background, and they're kind of just used as these like narrative tools to help move the story forward when it needs to. Whereas here they're taking a much more active position, and you have, you know, the young boy trying to warn the girl about what's happening, and he's doing that throughout the film. To me, that made more sense because it was like, yeah, you would think that the kid would be trying to warn everyone as to what's happening. I also really enjoyed the depth that they added to the protagonists and their marriage. You know, in the original film, like, you can kind of tell that the couple, they're a little bored with their life, right? Things aren't that exciting for them. And here they go even deeper into that and just show how rocky the marriage is between these two characters, like on the verge of separating, on the verge of divorcing, kind of rocky. I found the wife character in this version much more interesting and much more dynamic than in the original. They do give her a little bit more depth and also show like how she's unhappy in this marriage. Like in the original, the focus is really on the father, and then here it's more focusing on both of them, right? So you could kind of see how both of them would get themselves into this situation. Whereas in the first one, it was very much like the dad kind of forcing his family along on this vacation from hell. The moments that I liked most in this new version are the moments that I just talked about, right? These are the moments where they're deviating from the 2022 film and trying to do their own thing and trying to bring in their own elements. And I've said in the past, for me, if a remake is going to work, the one thing that I look for is, are you bringing something different to the table? Are you expanding the story at all? Are you expanding the themes at all? And I do feel like this film definitely expanded on the narrative, and those were the parts about this that I liked the most. The parts where, you know, it is just kind of like beat for beat of the original film and they are just like remaking the same scenes. Maybe they're expanding them a little bit more just so that James McAvoy can ham it up a little bit. As I said, if you have not seen the original, this is not going to be a problem for you. For me, I just found those parts to be the most like, those scenes were definitely the most uninteresting for me. I kind of found myself just like waiting to see when they were going to do something new, if they were going to do something new. Speaking of James McAvoy, he is obviously the jewel of this film. He's definitely the star of it. He's definitely carrying a lot of this narrative on his shoulders. He's just here to have like a good time. You will have a good time with him. You can tell that he was probably having a blast on set getting to play a character like this. He's looking good in a lot of these scenes. I liked it. So you're gonna have like a great time with him. If anything, it was kind of one of those things where it was like, I didn't feel he was like that menacing, only because I was having such a good time with his character. But he definitely adds a lot of the comedy to this film. The scene that stands out for me the most is the dancing scene, right? And we see it in the trailer when the kids are dancing to the Cotton Eye Joe song. In the original film, they have that scene, and it's like one of the most like uncomfortable moments of that film. You're just sitting there and watching this poor child getting like yelled at and abused. It's very difficult to watch. Whereas here you have the same scene and they make it funny. And I feel weird saying that it was funny, but you know, I was laughing at it. There were people in the audience laughing at it. And I remember seeing that moment in the trailer and being like, why does this feel kind of goofy? And it's because of James McAvoy's performance. I don't want to say like he's hamming it up or going like super over the top. Very erratic, but again, it's not erratic in a scary way. Right? He's just like yelling at this poor kid and is like, you're such a bad dancer. Go to your room.
That was not dancing. And go to your room.
I felt bad. I was like, I should not be laughing at this. But again, his performance is just like stealing that whole scene. Another thing that I liked about this movie is that I feel like it has really good setups and payoffs at the end. I've said it before, but I feel like this is something that we sometimes lack in a lot of modern, not just horror films, but just cinema in general. It's hard to get into specifics without talking about the ending. So what I'll just say is that there are things that get set up at the beginning of the film that definitely have a payoff and definitely help the characters by the end. And I liked that. To me, that's always a sign of good storytelling. That's always a sign that there's a competent filmmaker at the reins, right? That they had enough forethought to be like, okay, we're gonna have this at the beginning and we're gonna come full circle by the end. So now will probably be a good time to switch over into spoilers. I would say if you have not seen the original film, go and watch this because you're probably gonna have a really great time with it. If you have seen the original film and you're kind of iffy on if you wanna see this or not, maybe go to a matinee showing or go to like one of those cheap Tuesday showings at a Regal or AMC. Getting into spoilers right now, just to continue the setup and payoff conversation for a second. Like, I really loved how you have at the beginning of the film when the couple first comes to their house and James McAvoy is cooking this like goose that he killed, and he wants our wife protagonist to take a bite of it. It's already been set up that she's a vegetarian and she doesn't eat meat, but he has like one of those what are they called, those like forks with like the two like prongs on it, whatever those things are called. He has it out to her and he's just like holding it. It's like, here, eat it, right? I just like very much taunting her, and you can tell that he's taunting her. And then later on she finds that same tool and grabs it and like uses it to like stab him and fight him off. They also set up that the daughter has a lot of anxiety issues, right? She needs to use this like meditation app where it like tells her like, okay, breathe in, breathe out. And you can hear the app, like it makes these like breathing noises. That comes in later, right? The kids use that as a way to trick James McAvoy into thinking that they're hiding in a closet when they're really not. Very good like setup and payoffs in this movie. And again, to me, that's always a sign of like really good storytelling. As far as the ending goes, without getting into spoilers for the original film, it just has a very dark ending to it. It does not have a happy ending to it. And there were a lot of discussions when the trailer for this dropped around if the filmmakers were going to take a different route, if they were going to go for the kind of happier, safer Hollywood ending. And a lot of us were thinking that that's probably where they were going to go, and yes, that's exactly what they did here. I could see why people who maybe like the original but get really frustrated with it and really don't like the ending would really enjoy this film, because it gives you that ending that you wanted in the original. And the original was very much trying to hit home this theme and this warning about complacency and not standing up for yourself, obviously showing the dangers of that in a very exaggerated way. Whereas here it's like the couple, they stand up for themselves, they defeat the bad guys, the kids come out okay in the end, right? It's all like yay, happy family, very like American cinema in that sense. That ending being so like Hollywood in and of itself was also just like part of the joke. It's very funny. Like, I feel like some of the most comedic stuff is happening in this final act where you have these two couples facing off. Our protagonists are trying to save their family. And the third act is really just kind of like the greatest hits of what we've come to expect from these like home invasion films. This is not a home invasion film, but we see this a lot in these kinds of movies or like slasher films. Anything where you're having like a chase scene and we have the moment where she's like behind the door and she's dragging the dresser to the door to try to like lock it, and he's like pushing the door open and it feels like something from the Shining, right? We have the moment where they're all like crawling on the roof and there's the anxiety about them like falling. We have the moment where, you know, someone's trying to get away and they fall and they like twist their ankle, and so they can't like run around as quickly as they were before. It was okay. I do feel like it dragged on maybe like 5 or 10 minutes more than it needed to. I still prefer the darker tone that the original took. This new one, like, it didn't have that same feeling. It didn't leave me with like any like lingering questions or things to think about with my own behavior as I feel like the original did. They do throw these like weird social commentaries in here and there, whether it's about like the privilege of the white liberal middle class. It feels like there's something here too where the fact that by the end of the film you have the mom that's really taking the lead. That felt like something around like, you know, women and their roles in society. It felt like it wanted to have something like political there. I mean, I guess maybe the fact that you have this film in which you have this very like serious situation happening, but it's not being played serious, it's being played as like comedic and entertainment, and it's just like a show. You could say that's a commentary on America's current political climate, right? Something that should be serious, but it's just been like a farce. My other concern with this isn't even really with the movie itself. This is definitely the best thing that Blumhouse has done for a while. To me, I just worry that they're gonna look at that and be like, okay, well, yeah, we'll just continue on this trend of remakes and sequels and buying IP, and I know that they want like Friday the 13th and Elm Street and all of these like properties. I wish that they put as much effort into their original properties and their original ideas as they did these remakes. And I've had people like comment on some of the videos where I've talked about this before who have said things like, well, we just need to accept that like there's no new stories to tell and this is just like how it's going to be. And my response to that is bullshit. In this year alone, we have gotten a handful of original horror films, and even if I haven't like loved everything that's come out this year, at least that was an original idea. So there is still plenty of room and still plenty of opportunity to be telling original stories and for Hollywood to be supporting original stories. But I did just want to like bring that up. Like, original storytelling is not dead. There's still plenty of different points of views out there to be told. So those are my overall thoughts on the Speak No Evil remake. Those who have not seen the original, or for those who didn't like the original or where that one went, I think there's a lot here in this new one for you to enjoy. There is competent storytelling happening. You're gonna have a great time with James McAvoy. Let me know your thoughts on the new Speak No Evil. Did you hate it? Did you love it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching.
Of course I'm a bloody doctor.